Today is, as you probably are aware, Yom HaBchirot, election day in Israel. The truth of the matter is that we have election day, we have Bechira every day. One of the first blessings that we recite in the morning is Asher Bochar Bonu Mikol Ha'amim, that the Lord, so to speak, chose us, selected us out of all nations to be a special people, and that devolves upon us responsibilities, great responsibilities, and that all of our history is based upon the fact that the Lord has chosen us, and therefore we have historical events that occur to us that have a uniqueness and a special quality in order to reinforce the idea of the specialness of the people. So we come to the holiday of Purim. Now, the Gemara says, Esther min HaTorah min ayin. Where do we see Queen Esther in the Torah? The Gemara doesn't mean that literally. The Gemara is looking to explain references. The name Esther is not a Hebrew name in its origin. It's a Persian name. And how did it become a Hebrew name? Because of Queen Esther. But the Torah says, the Gemara says there's an indication much earlier regarding the story of Purim. There's seats here. Because in the Torah it says, Ki anochi hastir ponai mikem. God says that there is a level of relationship that the Lord has with the Jewish people that's called hastoras ponim. God's face, so to speak, is hidden from us. We don't see it. And the holiday of Purim is the example of what the Torah calls Nes Nistor, a hidden miracle. What does it mean, a hidden miracle? How are miracles hidden? Well, when we think of miracles, the splitting of the sea, 10 plagues on the Egyptians, the fact that 3 million people could be confined within a small area of the Mishkan, those are miracles because we have no scientific explanation for it. They're not completely rational. There's no pattern to it. So we recognize that as a miracle. The fact that a small flask of oil can burn for 8 days when it only has the capacity to burn for 1 day. So we understand that Hanukkah has a miraculous quality to it. And that's why we make the bracha she'asa nisim la'avoseinu, that the Lord performed miracles for our forefathers. And as he did then, so does he do now. So the issue arises that on Purim we make the same blessing. And on Purim there are no obvious miracles. If we read the Megillah, and we'll hear it read next week, God willing, So it's a narrative of court intrigue, of personal jealousies, of a king that is slightly out of focus. But it's a story. I mean, it's a Byzantine story that we can identify with. We live in a time when most of our leaders are out of focus. And that's the way it is. We're not impressed by it. We don't say it's miraculous. It's ordinary. Not only that, it's always been like that. It probably will always be like that. The perfect society, in spite of all claims to the contrary, the perfect society has never yet been constructed by human beings and never will be. Because by nature, human beings are imperfect. That does not apply to rabbis, but basically everybody else. They are not perfect. And people who are not perfect can't build a perfect world. You're asking them to do something that is beyond our abilities. So Purim is a nes nistar. It's a hidden miracle. Because we don't see anything miraculous. If we don't see anything miraculous, then why do we make the blessing, She'oso Nisim, that he made miracles for our forefathers at the time of Mordechai and Esther long ago in Shushan. So now we have to come to a definition of what is a hidden miracle. And I think we can apply that to, later, I hope, to our time as well. A hidden miracle is a number of natural events that in themselves are not miraculous. The king gets mad at his wife. His wife does a foolish thing. She's married to a very volatile person, a very violent person, who not only doesn't take no for an answer, he doesn't know is not in his vocabulary. She foolishly defies him publicly. And he has a very short fuse, very difficult temper. And in a rage, he kills her. There's cold-blooded murder, which occurs in our world. That's the Holocaust. And then there's murder that occurs because the person loses control over one's emotions and one's actions. Here the king loses control, kills his wife. So now he's not without female companionship. That's not his problem. The ancient kings had harems. Women were not their problem, shortage of women. But he needs a queen. He needs a queen because in the world of monarchies, there always has to be an heir. Succession must always be assured. If succession is not assured, then the king himself is viewed as being illegitimate. That's why Henry VIII killed all of his wives trying to get an heir. And he ended up with a woman who was one of the great monarchs in English history. So he needs a queen. Okay, that's one piece of the story. That's very natural. There's nothing miraculous. I don't even know if it would be front page news. That's the way it was. Okay, let's leave that story. Now I'm going to take another story. Jewish people were exiled from the land of Israel. It's 52 years after the exile began. They settled in what is today Iraq and Iran. Now, the Persian Empire overcame the Babylonian Empire. It was the Babylonian Empire that destroyed the temple and exiled the Jews. But the Babylonian Empire itself falls to the Persian Empire. The whole history of the world is that there's no empire that lasts forever. It's a bitter pill for powerful countries to swallow, but it's there. And it's a fact. And until now, there have been no exceptions. Some last much longer than others. The Roman Empire lasted 500 years. The British Empire lasted a few centuries. The Ottoman Empire lasted 500 years. But they're all in the dustbin of history. We moved on. And what about the Jewish people? Well, we read in the Navi Yecheskel, who was in the exile in Babylonia, that the elders of the Jewish people came to him and they said, you know, we were exiled. We're never going back. How are we ever going to overcome the Babylonian Empire or the Persian Empire? How we overcome these empires? We're never going back. We're not going to be an independent people. There's not going to be a temple. So why should we be Jewish? We don't need all of this nonsense. You don't have to eat differently and dress differently and talk differently and take off a day of the week. And we don't know who needs all of this. In a famous phrase, they said, Kechol hagoyim beis Yisrael. The people of Israel, the house of Israel, were just like everybody else. So we quit. You know, Shlomo Carlebach used to say that when he went on a college campus and he asked a student, what are you? So he said, I'm a Catholic. He said, I'm a Protestant. I'm a Lutheran. I'm a Muslim. But if a student answered, I'm a human being, he said, that's a Jew. Because that's what, it's Kechol hagoyim. We're just like, I'm not better. What right? I say I'm better than somebody born in Thailand or in China or in Omaha, Nebraska. Why am I the chosen people? So we quit. The prophet is nonplussed. You have no answer for them. What's he supposed to say to them? And included in that is naturally the fact that I can marry whoever I want. You know, Mary's a very fine girl. She's nicer than the Jewish princesses. That night, the Navi has a dream. This is all in the Navi Yecheskel, in the 12th chapter. That's why knowledge of Nevi'im is so important. Because Nevi'im speak to us. They're not telling us old stories. They're talking to us. And you're supposed to be able to see yourself in the story. So he said, that night I have a dream, the Navi says. That's how prophecy was. All the prophets except for Moshe only saw prophecy when they were dreaming, when they were out of it. Then when they woke up, they wrote down what they had dreamt. And Moshe was the only one that never lost his faculties, even when in communication with heaven. So he has this dream, and in the dream the Lord appears to him. Now, one of the traits, so to speak, of the Lord, if I could use that phrase, is that he is nothing if not courteous. When you enter a conversation with someone, you have to say a few nice words before. So God said to him, what happened today? You know, like, how was your day in the office? And the prophet answers him, you know what happened today? The elders of Israel came to me, and they said they quit. And the Lord said to him, and what did you answer them? He had answered them, Aho Hashem Elokim Ato Yodeya, only I have no answer for them. What am I going to tell them? So the Lord said to him, you know what to tell him? This is never going to happen, that you're going to be able to quit on me. That's never going to happen. So you should forget about that option. Im kiloem lo chaleim, I will rule over them. B'chema shfucha, without poured anger, uvizroa netuya, with a great outstretched hand. I'll show them. And right after that is the story of Purim. Here comes a guy, Haman. Who is Haman? The Gemara says he was a barber. Gave haircuts. But we all know that everybody can become anybody. And somehow he rises to power. And he's got a problem with the Jews. Not the Talmud and Megillah tries to find a rational reason for his problem. But at the end, there is no rational reason. There's no rational reason in the world why the world has a problem with us, why it has a problem with this little state, why it's so troubled by us, why everything is because of us, and everything is our fault. I remember in 1974, most of you were not existent yet. So there was an Arab oil boycott after the Yom Kippur War. And they didn't ship oil to the United States. And there was a great shortage of gasoline. You had to wait in line 3-4 hours to get gasoline at the gas stations. And most of the time, they only gave you a few gallons. It was, there were bumper stickers that said, "Burn Jews, not gas." Lest you think that America was always pristine, pure, or is so today. So I was then the head of the OU Kashrus, and I was flying around the world. And I did a lot of things on behalf of Israel because no country would accept the Israeli rabbis to look at the Kashrus. So we had to do it from America for them. In any event, I'm sitting on a plane, And there's a businesswoman that's sitting next to me. And I was minding my own business, as I always do. And out of nowhere, she says to me, "You know that all of this is your fault." And I said to her, "Madam, it's because of me, but it's not my fault." And that is a truism in the world. Hakol b'shvil Yisrael. All of it is because of us. Why? How? Where? Hard to read God's mind, so to speak. Hard for us to know. So Haman becomes the chief minister of the king. And Haman has it in for the Jews for some reason. And it doesn't make any difference, the reason, and it doesn't make any difference whether the reason was valid or invalid. Hitler had it in for the Jews. Stalin had it in for the Jews. Bernie Sanders had it in for the Jews. Okay, everybody has their reasons. The Jews have it in for the Jews. So, that's the second piece of the puzzle. Again, it's a natural thing, nothing miraculous. It's not a miracle that Haman became Haman. If they would have had psychoanalysts, therapists then, they would probably explain it. That he was abused as a child or something, who knows? We live in a time when nothing is our fault. It's always somebody else did something to us. I come from the old American public school system with Irish spinster school teachers, and you got a good rap on your knuckles if you didn't do your homework. So you did your homework. Today, she'd be in prison. And I would not have done my homework. I probably wouldn't be able to speak English. But that would be all right, because I would feel good about myself. And as long as you feel good, nothing else matters. It's all how you feel. And we cannot ruffle anyone's feelings. So, Haman is there. Piece number 2. The king is looking for a queen. So he decides he's going to have a reality show. He's going to have a contest. And he creates a bureaucracy, which is what government is for. And they're looking for girls. And they're appointed and this and that, and they round up a large number of women, beautiful women. And the king is going to try them out one at a time. In this net that the bureaucracy casts to somehow capture women, they take a girl out of the Beis Yaakov seminary, who the Talmud says is not attractive. Now, every woman is attractive. No woman is ugly. And beauty is always in the eye of the beholder. I remember when I was headed my yeshiva in Muncie for a few decades. So there was one young man whom I was very impressed with, and I thought that he was, and he's become a very important person in the community, etc. And so I said to him, I know this family, and they've got a daughter, and I think that the daughter is perfect for you. She's a wonderful girl. Take her out. So he listened to me, and he took her out. After a few days, I didn't hear from him. So I said to him, what happened? How did it go? And I saw he hemmed and he hawed and and then he blurted out the truth. He says, Rebbe, I have to tell you the truth. Don't judge me. I have to marry a very beautiful woman, and she isn't. I said, oh, I understand that. That's fine. A year later, this young man and his bride are standing under the chuppah, and I am performing the wedding. Now again, no woman is ugly, but this girl was close. And he has to marry a beautiful, very beautiful woman. Look at this thing. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And they lived happily ever after, Baruch Hashem. So they pick up this girl from Beis Yaakov, who is not especially attractive, and who is observant of Jewish law, and the king picks her. So that this is not miraculous by itself, but it borders on the unusual. And she has an uncle who's a member of the Jewish Sanhedrin, who is a great scholar and a pious Jew, and a very capable and astute person, Mordechai. And Mordechai tells her, don't tell him you're Jewish. Don't tell him where you come from. So first of all, it's intriguing to be with a person that doesn't tell you about his or her past. I'm giving you good advice. She doesn't tell her. Ein Esther Mageres Esamov Esmolareto. She doesn't say anything. And he marries her, and he makes a big wedding, and he has a feast of 180 days, and he's so happy. So it says that he has a feast at which everyone can participate. So we had a glatt, kosher, Chassidish, Shchita, Chol of Yisrael section. And the Jews all came and participated. No, not so it's kosher. It's the kosher hot dog stand at Met Stadium. And then you daven mincha, and then you go back to the game. So now all these pieces are there. Again, none of them by themselves are astoundingly miraculous. But we have now the basis for the story. And Haman tells the king, we should get rid of all the Jews. Not only that, the Jews have a lot of money. We get rid of all the Jews, we'll have the money, but it'll be 10,000 silver shekels in the king's treasury. Everybody's going to have money here. The German government has paid reparations to the Jewish people for the Holocaust, but it's estimated that much less than 20% has ever been returned. The world is full of Jewish money. Ill-gotten, stolen. But that's the way it is. Every so often there's a great painting that shows up, and then some old Jew says, that was in my house. And then there are lawsuits and everything. And then everybody says, you know, the Jews are money grubbers. There's a film called The Woman in Gold. If you ever have a chance, I don't recommend going to films, but if you ever have a chance to see a film, it's an absolutely kosher film. That's why it was not a success. But it's a remarkable story. It's a Musar lesson about a painting and about how an old Jewish lady in California and a Jewish lawyer that had no connection to Judaism whatsoever defeated the Austrian government in getting the painting back, and how he became a Jew in the process. But that's a side story. Okay, so now Haman says, not only that, Haman has a tremendous ego. Now, ego is necessary to be a leader. The question is, can you control your ego? When the Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most modest of all humans, that doesn't mean that he didn't have an ego. It meant he knew how to control it. So when Moshe faces Korach and the rebellion, Moshe is strong as a lion. And other times, Moshe is extremely modest. Now, Haman has an ego that's uncontrollable. So he issues an edict that when he appears, everyone has to bow down to him. Okay, everybody bows down to him. Because in a totalitarian state, if you don't do what they tell you, so then you're gone. Mordechai will not bow down to him. The Gemara in Megillah discusses his reasons for not bowing, and there's always a discussion among the commentators as to whether those reasons were sufficient. And Haman notices that Mordechai doesn't bow down to him. And he's not satisfied in just getting rid of Mordechai, but he's going to get rid of all the Jews, because to him all the Jews are Mordechai's. So imagine, you come out on the square, and there are 100,000 people, and when you come out, everybody bows down to you. And there's one guy in the back that doesn't bow down to you. So, okay. Haman can't bear that. Haman will say to his wife and his advisors, he calls them together, Vayasaper Lahem, and he tells them, Rov Godlo, all the glory he has and all the position that he has, that's Rov Oshro, and how much money he has, and how great his family is. And then he says, V'chol zein enu shoveli. And this whole thing is not worth anything to me because there's one guy that doesn't bow down to me. When I see Mordechai HaYehudi, he doesn't bow down to me, so that my life is ruined. That's what is called ego. So we find in the Torah, the Gemara says, Homan min HaTorah minayin. Where do we see Homan in the Torah? So the Gemara says, because it says in the Garden of Eden that the Lord, so to speak, said to Adam, Hamin o eitz hazeh ochalta, did you eat from this tree? I share lo tzivisi, that I told you not to eat from. So the Gemara says, it says Hamun, hey mem nun, and it says Hamin, hey mem nun. So the Gemara says that's what we see Haman. The Gemara is not just playing with words here. It's not just that it's the same letters. It's the same concept. God put man into paradise. You can eat mikol eitz hagan ochel tochel. You can eat whatever you want. Just this tree don't eat from. That's the one you want to eat from. That's human beings. It's not what we have, it's what we don't have. That's where our ego destroys us. Chazal said, Ezeu Ashir HaSameach B'Chelko. Who is the wealthiest of all people? Someone that has satisfaction in what he has. And my neighbor has a Mercedes, a Lexus, so my Ford is useless. Even though it's a good car, takes me where I want to go, does everything it's supposed to. But it's no good anymore, because my neighbor has a Lexus. So Haman is undone by his own ego. And then he concocts this plan to destroy all of the Jewish people. And he's got a special gallows built for Mordechai. And the gallows is 150 feet in the air, so everybody can see. So from here the rabbis say another great lesson. You never know who you build the gallows for. He's building the gallows for himself. If he would have known it, he would have put it 6 inches off the ground. But he's building it for someone else. It's John Donne's famous poem, Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls but for thee. So, and he's going to come to the house of the king, the palace, and present the plan. And he's sure the king is going to agree with him. So now everything has been put into place. There are no miracles. Mordechai enlists Esther. He says to her, if you're quiet now, when the Jewish people are in danger and you want to hide, you're going to save yourself because you're in the king's palace. You should know, you and your family will be lost forever. The Lord will save us in a different way. You are not indispensable, but you have the ability to do something. So do it, which is also a great lesson. And now she approaches the king, And she arranges these banquets with the king and Haman. And Haman, the idiot, flirts with the queen, which does not sit well with the king. And then she accuses, the king is pretty well drunk, and he's lost control, and she accuses him. And the king said, who would dare do such a thing? And she says, Haman Rosh Hazeh, and they hang Haman. And then the Jewish people are given the right to defend themselves. There is a war against their enemies, and the Jews are able to survive, and that's the story of Purim. So where's the miracle here? The miracle is that a lot of pieces have to come together in order for this to happen. That's what's called a nes nistor. That's what's called a hidden miracle. A lot of different things happen in order for the pieces to come together. I'm not an expert on our time or on history. I enjoy history. I read it. I wrote about it. I think it's fascinating. But when I look at our time, you know, we're sitting here next to the Western Wall on a sunny afternoon in Jerusalem, in a Jewish state, where the Jewish people are voting today for a government. We are self-governing. We have an independence that we never had for millennia. We're in an institution that teaches Torah, which everyone said couldn't happen, and no one would be interested. So that's pretty much a miraculous situation. But it was made up of a lot of different pieces. When Theodor Herzl met the Kaiser here in the land of Israel in 1898, so Herzl had this idea of a Jewish state. But his idea of the Jewish state was that it would be part of an imperial empire. So he shopped it to all the empires in the world. And whichever empire would buy into it, that would be what the state would look like. So he tried to convince the Kaiser that Germany was very interested then in taking over here. That's why we still have the German colony here. The Kaiser brought 10,000 Templar Germans here to settle in Jerusalem. The fact that there are red roofs here in parts of Jerusalem, that's all part of the Kaiser's plan. So Herzl tells him, you know, I'll bring the Jews, and Germany will control the country, and everything will be fine. So the Kaiser didn't want to buy into it. And the Kaiser told him as follows. This is written in Herzl's memoirs. He said, in order for a Jewish state to arise in the land of Israel, he said, all of the major empires of the world will have to collapse. And he named them: the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire. They all will have to collapse. And he said, and Herr Herzl, you know that that is impossible. But the Kaiser was a prophet. All those empires collapsed. And then the Jewish state arose. It happened. So is that a miracle? I don't know. But a lot of pieces have to fall into place. A lot of things have to happen. And that's what we call the hashgacha, the guidance of heaven. It's not very apparent to us. But it's true in our personal lives, and it's true certainly in our national life. In order for me to be here, a lot of things have to happen. Now, I'm the one that made the choices. But my example is, that marvelous program on our telephone called Waze. I want to go from point A to point B. So Waze says, okay, let's go. And Waze says, turn right. I'm in a bad mood that day. I don't want to listen to Waze. I don't turn right. I'm going straight. My decision. Waze says, okay, recalculating. You go another 5 miles. It says, the next roundabout, turn right. I still don't want to turn right. It's my decision. I have freedom of choice. I can do whatever I want. But eventually, if I want to get to my destination, I'm going to turn right. Eventually, Waze is going to prove correct. So Waze is, so to speak, the heavenly guidance. The decisions along the way are all mine. They're all personal. I can do whatever I want. But I'm part of a narrative. I'm part of a puzzle. I'm part of a much bigger picture than just me. And because of that, therefore, I'm very important, but I am also not exactly the free agent that I think I am. And that basically is the story of Purim. That's what we learn from it. All the pieces of the puzzle have to come somehow into play. And when you look at it in the whole picture, when we hear the whole Megillah, oh, so that's a nes, it's a miracle. Sho'asa nisim lavoseinu. Esther, Mordechai, how this happened, how Haman misplayed his hand, how the king took Esther for a queen. All of that is part of the narrative. But every participant on the way made his or her own choice. Did what they wanted to do. So the Lord told the Novi Yechezkel, it's not going to happen. They're not going to quit on me. I'm not going to let them. So it could be 80% will quit on me, but not all of them. I'm not going to let it happen. Purim is the example. Finally, we have a famous statement that Purim is Yom Kippur is Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. What's the comparison, Purim to Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur, we don't eat and we don't drink, and the Purim is feasting and happiness. It's to teach us on Yom Kippur we are spiritual and we see things clearly. We cleanse ourselves. We realize who we are. Purim, we're in a costume. We don't really see it clearly. But we should be sensitive that Purim is like Yom Kippur. That the narrative is going on. And that we are part of it. And to that extent, therefore, we fulfill our obligation. We're able to be what the Lord wanted us to be. So I want to thank you all for listening. Wake up the guy next to you. And I want to wish you a very happy Purim and great success in your studies and in your life and in your families. And we should hear always good news one from another. Kol Tuv Selo.